Switch back to main camera. Okay, so yes, time for a video. A couple of things I want to talk about here today. First thing, something I've mentioned in the past, but today is a good demonstration. I'll go back to this. Turn that off, turn this on. Okay, so right now they are they're upgrading the power pole directly across the street from my house, and that turned off power to my house and probably several other houses on this block. So one of the things I've mentioned here in this scenario is that we have battery backup in case of brownouts and blackouts. I don't get to show this very often, so I'm going to show it here. It's kind of noisy outside too, so if you hear them yelling or the cars racing by making noise, it's because of the work happening outside. Okay, so let me see. I'm going to go over here. I'm going to grab my drawing tools. I want to bring your attention to something here. It's this part right here. Why is that so big? This is my grid attachment. My grid attachment is none. It's grayed out. 0 volts AC, 0 hertz. So that's because they're taking out the power pole. I'm going to replace it. This doesn't happen very often that we don't have any power, but it happens occasionally. Here in California, it's not becoming uncommon because of something called a public safety power shutoff, PSPS. They do public safety power shutoffs when they're worried that conditions are going to cause fires. They're worried about electrical fires due to the utility. So they will sometimes shut off the power if they're worried that the wind is coming up or something else is happening. Also, the construction of data centers all over California, in particular where I live, which is Silicon Valley, is making unusual and unexpected power draws on the public utility. So no surprise, we expect blackouts and brownouts. So right now, we're doing really good here at the ranch. Our solar is working. We've got a little over 3.5 kilowatts coming in from the sun. The voltage on the batteries is currently about 53 volts. Fully charged is 54, but it's kind of hard to get to 54 this time of year. And our load is a little less than a kilowatt. So on the whole, we are producing. That's what this is saying over here. We are producing, and that's good because there's no power. They actually took down our service drop. There's no power. I'm getting an echo. I think it's from this. I'm going to put this somewhere else. I don't know why that has to echo. So that's what's happening. I just wanted to point that out. Our service is down, but we're doing okay, and that feels good. That's what you want. That's what you want. That's why we do this. The actual purpose of today's video has more to do with, well, let me just talk about this first. So I wrote a book. It was 100 Days. It's an end of civilization novel. It's available at Amazon. You might want to check it out. It's about how people behave, good and bad, when their world comes to an end. And it deals with the power supply. It deals with what I have going on here with my solar power and a bunch of other things. It's kind of a user's manual for how to deal with the world when everything is trying to shut itself down. So you might want to take a look at that if you have a chance. Link is in the description. And if you want to support me other ways, there's also a link to buy me a coffee. And I appreciate the support. What I wanted to talk about today was there's an article my wife sent me. It's here on my cell phone, so let me take a look at this. It's the title of it is A Mid-Century World Few Are Prepared For. So I just want to discuss this. I have no problem with the premise. This is not a denialist article. It's actually on Substack, but the source of it was a podcast by the MEER project, MEER. And MEER, what does MEER stand for? I looked it up. Let me see if I can find this again. MEER. Okay, it's an acronym, MEER, Mirrors for Earth's Energy Rebalancing. So I'll come back to them in a minute. They're not doing anything wrong, but I think we need to be aware of what it is that they are doing. So let's do this. Turn this off, turn this on. No, I don't want that either. We'll just go with this. So the question is, what does it mean when someone says, a German physicist, so we'll go with that, when someone says, oh, we're going to be 3 degrees C above a pre-industrial baseline by 2050? You're going to be hearing a lot about this. And you're going to be hearing this from organizations like MEER, MEER. It's not commonly covered in the news. It's not commonly covered in corporate media that we're in big trouble. We're in serious trouble. The Earth in 2023, the ocean temperatures in 2023 basically went off the charts, off the edge of the map, came back a little bit, but still the situation is really bad, to be honest. And it's common now that governments are paying more attention to this. It's also common that governments are going the opposite direction. Now that they know there is a problem, that they can't like poo-poo away, that this is for some future generation of politicians are going to worry about that. Now that it's actually happening, it started in 2023 and in 2025 and now into 2026, we've had record weather of every kind. Record heat waves, record cold snaps, record amounts of rain, record amounts of snow. Rain and snow are kind of the same thing. Just the temperature difference. So if it's possible for you to have record rain, then you can also have record snow, because all you need is cold. How do you get cold during global heating? Okay, well, maybe I'll talk about that. In any case, governments and corporate media are noticing that these things are happening, and they didn't want them to happen, and they never wanted to address them or talk about them or think about them. They wanted someone else to have to deal with that. Well, the chickens are coming home to roost. I talk on here all the time about how much time we have and how little time we have and how poorly prepared people are. And so this article was basically saying the same thing. So this guy is saying we're going to have, it's plausible is what he's saying, plausible is his word, to have a 3 degrees C of warming by 2050. Let me tell you how this is probably going to work. We're going to have a 3 degrees C increase in global average temperature. I have problems with the average, but let's just stick with it for now. With the global average temperature probably by 2035, not 2050, 2035. So yeah, it's going to happen. Almost certainly sooner than these guys are claiming. It's safe to push it off to 2050. You could even do what some people do and say, we'll have a 3 degrees C temperature increase by the year 2100. And that's safe to do, because you'll certainly be correct. If you have an earlier date, you may miss it by a couple of years, but you'll certainly be correct to say that we could have 3 degrees C average warming by the year 2100. If it's 6 degrees C, then people say, oh, you were right, you just got the number wrong, right? So you'll get less criticism if you push the date further and further out. I'm not interested in avoiding criticism. I'm not interested really in anything except preparing people for what the reality is going to be. And the reality is you're going to have 3 degrees C above pre-industrial average by about 2035, maybe sooner, maybe 2033, 5 years from now. Well, more than 5 years. 7 years from now. You're going to cross 2 degrees C, which is actually a more interesting and more potent number, by probably 2030. So yeah, you'll cross 3 degrees C by maybe 2035 or 2033, but you're going to cross 2 degrees C by probably 2030. And that's bad. That's bad. That's kind of the end of the world. We're seeing weather phenomena right now that confound description. Meteorologists are finally getting on board and saying this is we've never seen this in the living memory. That means, and nobody alive today has seen this in living memory. Or they'll say we have not seen these kinds of conditions in the historic record. So that goes back even further than living memory, right? Truth is, we haven't seen conditions like this in probably 3-4 million years. It's possible. Certainly not any sooner than the last, interglacial 100,000 years ago. Well, we weren't there, so we don't really know what conditions were like. But the last time we, might have seen these things was 100,000 years ago. We are off the edge of the map, is the point, already. We haven't really crossed 2 degrees C. We are already off the edge of the map. And what's coming for us is annihilation. I don't know how else to put it. I really don't. Just annihilation. Everything you thought was sacred and eternal is going to be brought down, because it's just going to be too much violence in the system. The Earth system is a machine. We live inside of it. And as it gets hotter and hotter, then that energy can do work. It can melt ice, which is one set of problems, but it can also spin up hurricanes. It can spin up tornadoes. It can create malformed weather, just weather extremes that just defy description. And as this picture suggests, you can get secondary knock-on effects like wildfires. Wildfires need certain conditions to really take off and be extremely dangerous, like drought or heat or dry vegetation. And you can easily have those 3 conditions right there during a massive heat wave. And so global heating has been providing us with massive heat waves almost everywhere. They've had record fires. It's really hard to keep up with what's happening. They've had record fires in Chile, here in the US, Canada, parts of Europe, Australia, where else? Parts of Russia. They have fires in like Russia and Canada that just burn forever. They never go out because you can't fight them. They're in remote areas. You can't get to them, and because they're in remote areas, who really cares, right? But the point is, the fires just burn and burn and burn and never go out. Zombie fires. They never die. And as the planet gets warmer, and as these warm spells both deepen and persist, then the types of horrors we're going to see will deepen and persist. And deep and persistent horrors like catastrophic fires, catastrophic storms, extreme weather, they cause civilizational collapse. So this article is saying, we'll get 3 degrees C by 2050, and that's a problem. Almost everybody else on the planet who's serious about this topic will tell you 2 degrees C is a drop dead. If we cross 2 degrees C, we're into very dangerous territory. And the only discussion among people about that particular temperature is when are we going to do it? And there are plenty of people who will tell you we're going to cross 2 degrees C average increase in temperature by 2050. And that would even be considered alarmist. And then you get me. I'm telling you, you're going to cross it in 2030. And, and you'll cross it so fast it'll make your head spin. Because that's what's happening. We are now on the exponential. Things are now falling apart faster than we can even recognize it or report it. But we're seeing it in the environmental system. Now, there's a couple of things I could say about this paper. No, this is a transcript from a podcast. This is on Substack, which is a writer's forum, and this was taken from a podcast. I've watched some of MEER's podcasts. I do have a very specific set of criticisms. I don't have a problem with what they're doing, but I have a kind of a problem with what they're doing. Let's see if I can pull anything out of this. I'm looking at my phone here. So, this is a quote from the physicist. The higher the average temperature, the more energy is in the system, and more energy means everything becomes more violent. And I've been saying this on this channel. I'm really appreciating that he's talking so frankly. Heat is one of the manifestations of global heating. I mean, it's right there in the title, right? We kind of know. I'm sorry for the noise. I'm sure you're able to hear that. Now the utility people are tree trimming and having to chip up the limbs. Not a good day to be doing this. Anyway, it's not just that the system gets hotter. And you might even think, oh, well, I'll just solve that with air conditioning, which you may or may not be able to do, by the way. For example, my power is off today in theory, so I can't run my air conditioner in theory. I mean, I can, but unless you've got my setup, having an air conditioner might not do you much good in the future because you don't have electricity. But the problem is violence in the system. We don't think about hurricanes when they come ashore as being warmer or bringing heat. They're bringing catastrophic floods, catastrophic storm surge, catastrophic winds. All of this is an expression of violence. And I don't talk about this nearly as much as I should on this channel. As the Earth gets hotter, and 2 degrees C will do it. You don't have to wait for 3. We're already seeing violence at like 1.5, which is where things currently are now. We're going to cross 2 degrees C in just a year or two, and then we'll be stuck with it. You don't have to wait. You don't have to wait for 3. You're going to get it at 2, and what you're going to get is violence. Massive amounts of violence in the system. And humans, the way that type of animals we are, we're not, I mean, we're large, but we're not powerful animals. And certainly not everyone in our community is a large, powerful animal. I can deal with a lot of violence in my environment. Can my wife? Can the children next door? Maybe not, right? So we just have to be aware that as the system becomes more energetic, hotter certainly, but just in general more energetic, then we're going to have violence. We're going to have violence like people cannot comprehend. It's just incomprehensible. I don't know even how to start. We're going to have violence that will lead to mass fatality events. Now, heat can do that too, and flooding rains can do that, and high winds can do that. Well, high winds is violence. But there will be so much violence in the system, just mechanical violence, like winds and floods, floodwaters, dragging cars and people and buildings out to sea. There will be so much violence in the system that we can't cope. Now, maybe some of us can cope, but if there's a large enough number of us that cannot cope, then we can't cope. Because pretty soon, all of our excess resources are going to the people who just got wiped out. Every week there's a new group of people being wiped out. And if you don't pour your excess resources into them to fix them and make them okay, then they're going to become permanently damaged, and permanently damaged people become a permanent problem. What happens to people that have become a permanent problem? Think about it. They're neglected, basically. If there's no easy solution, if there's no ready solution for these people, ready at hand, and just roll this out and they'll be okay, then they become a permanent problem. And that means permanent expenditures, permanent unrest, permanent refugees, permanent humanitarian crisis, children that don't have food and clothing or schools or anything else really, hospitals that are overwhelmed. You end up with a permanent crisis, and maybe there's no escape. In fact, what we're going to have is what's called a polycrisis, and that's the thumbnail for this. That's the thumbnail for this thing. I could even maybe I should let me bring up that picture because I think it's kind of cool. I'm going to browse. I'm going to find my polycrisis image. Yeah, I know I'm doing this when I should be doing something else. Here we go. Yes. So this is the polycrisis. This is the Titanic, and in this picture, the Titanic is it's sinking. It's on fire. It's being attacked by some sea monster, and it's being attacked by an alien invasion. So this is a polycrisis. If you're on the Titanic right now, you wouldn't know what to do. In the foreground, people have escaped on a lifeboat. They're not fighting the space aliens. They're not fighting the sea beasts. They're not putting the fire out. They just skipped. They found a lifeboat and got on it, and they're rowing away. So when your situation is as bad as this, then yeah, that's what you have to do. And the number of people in a lifeboat in this picture is really small. What is this? 1% of the people on the Titanic? Is this maybe a half of a percent? A tenth of a percent? Yeah, that's about what we're talking about here. I say this on the channel all the time, and I hope people are starting to think about this. My actual expectation, and I don't see any way around this, so this is my working expectation, is that 999 people out of 1,000 will perish. Who gets to survive? What determines that? In this picture, who got on the lifeboat? How did they know to do that? How were they able to do that? Who brought a lifeboat? Who owns the lifeboat? Who has access to the lifeboat before the people? Was there money involved? Are all these people on this lifeboat millionaires who basically bought or bribed their way onto the only lifeboat so they could sail away from this poly crisis? I don't know how it's going to be, but in the future it's not going to be some picture like this that I made up on AI. It's going to be civilization. And you don't have to wait for 3 degrees C above any pre-industrial baseline. We're going to start seeing, well, we're already seeing a poly crisis right now, and we haven't even crossed 2 degrees C. Well, we already have catastrophic fires, catastrophic floods, catastrophic rain amounts, and snow amounts, because rain and snow is just the same thing except for freezing temperatures. We're having marine heat waves that are lofting moisture into the atmosphere, where the moisture can precipitate out later is rain and snow. We're already there. We're already there, people. So what's it going to be like in 2 years when we, or 3 years when we cross 2 degrees C? And least of all, 3. Will we even make it to 3? Will there be anybody even around to notice? Oh, hey, guess what, people? Here's a big event. We just crossed 3 degrees C above average pre-industrial, using a pre-industrial baseline for average temperature. Will anyone even know that? Will anyone even care? Will there be anyone even to calculate that? Will there be anyone left, scientists or otherwise, who can calculate and publish that event? Great event today, people. We finally crossed 3 degrees C above a pre-industrial baseline average temperature. And what year is it? 2035, 2037? Well, by then, I don't think anybody will care. And not because it's not important, but because they'll be dealing with a poly crisis. And by then, probably a large part of 999 out of 1,000 people will be dead. So we are going into a future where we actually care less and less and less with every passing year about global heating and the greenhouse effect and carbon emissions and fossil fuel consumption. We're going to care less and less and less with time because we're going to be too busy surviving. We'll be less concerned, not because it's less of a problem or we have solutions. It's because we'll be too busy surviving. Or if we're not surviving, we'll be too busy dying to muster any interest in anything outside of survival and not dying. It's hard for you to care about have we crossed 3 degrees C? Have we crossed 2 degrees C? It's hard for you to worry about abstractions like that if you're in a car and the car is being swept down the river out to sea. Or if you're on the second floor of an apartment building and the first floor is completely underwater and you've been stuck in the second floor for a week because the floodwaters won't recede. And you have no water to drink. You can't drink the floodwater because it'll kill you in a couple of hours from pollutants and toxins and bacteria. And you ran out of food 3 days ago, and you don't have water, and you're becoming delirious, and maybe it's record heat too. I mean, who knows? It's a polycrisis, right? You can have all these things going on. You haven't had electricity for a week, and the air conditioning doesn't work, and you don't have water, and you ate your last food, and then someone publishes a paper saying that, hey, we just crossed 2 degrees C above pre-industrial baseline. Isn't that interesting? No, it's not. Because people are dying. We're never going to do anything about this. We can't. We can't. We didn't. We had 70 years to work on this, and we didn't. Why didn't we? Oh, the usual reasons. There was money to be made in not doing anything. There was money to be saved in not doing anything. Doing something costs money. Doing something reduces profits. Doing something reduces consumerism. Because that's probably one of the things you're going to have to do, is reduce consumerism. Certainly of fossil fuels, which are responsible for heating the atmosphere. And so this guy is saying, on this podcast for MEER, he's saying, look, we've got big problems. In such a world, 3 degrees C above baseline, heat waves intensify beyond today's extremes. Now, today's extremes are already extreme because of global heating. We're already in this. So today's extremes, as bad as they are, and as difficult as they are, it'll be much, much worse if we ever hit 3 degrees C. And of course, as I mentioned, it'll be much, much worse if we hit 2 degrees C, which we're going to do shortly. A summer spike of 40 degrees C in southern Europe becomes a 45 degrees C or 50 degrees C in rare but devastating episodes. One, they would not be rare. And they would not be short. This is some normalcy bias. Right now, massive heat waves are rare. Debilitating heat waves are rare. Heat waves that make the evening news are rare. In the future, that same level of heat wave will actually be the norm. It won't even be called a heat wave. The heat wave will be something worse than that. Those won't be rare either. We will commonly go from extremely hot, almost uninhabitable, to clearly uninhabitable, and we'll do that every 2 weeks or once a month. Wet bulb conditions, where humidity and temperature combine to overwhelm the body's ability to cool itself, move from occasional anomalies to recurring events in parts of South Asia, the Middle East, and Africa, and Europe, and the UK, and the South and Southeast of America. Everywhere. Because the wet bulb temperature is a combination of the temperature, how hot it is, and also how humid it is. We're already having marine heat waves. Marine heat waves in the water of the ocean, okay, leads to increased evaporation, leads to increased humidity. That never stops. It only gets worse. The marine heat waves never go away. They only get worse. And as they get worse, there's going to be more humidity. And as there's more humidity and that combines with more heat, then you're going to have what we call wet bulb temperatures that exceed human capacity to survive. And that leads to mass fatality events. And, okay, fine. Where are we going to have a mass fatality event? I don't know. India, Southeast Asia, right? South Africa, parts of the Central America, but we also have them in Florida and the Gulf states. The Gulf of Mexico will be too hot. There'll be too much moisture, too much humidity, and then you get a heat wave. And then you have conditions of both humidity and heat where humans cannot survive. And when they can't survive, they die. And we'll have mass fatality events possibly this summer as we go into a El Nino phase of the ENSO. We're going to have probably some crazy heat. I did a video on this about 2 months ago because we know that the ENSO is swinging, and we're going to get an El Nino event. And I heard a few weeks ago it could even be a record El Nino. And everything is piling on, people. Everything is piling on. And this podcast is saying, okay, well, we might have 3 degrees C increase by the year 2050. You're not going to have to wait for the year 2050. Why are they talking like this? There's a reason. I'll get to it in a minute. One of the problems with this entire discussion, and here they're talking about 3 degrees C increase in the average temperature. It's just this whole idea of average. And actually, in fairness, he does mention that down here. I'm not sure I'll be able to find it, but he does mention that. And actually, even though we're talking about the average global temperature, the average global temperature isn't very interesting. I can give you an example. Your feet are in the oven's on, and your head is in the freezer's on. But on average, you're fine. Half of you is boiling, cooking, half of you is freezing, but on average, you're fine. And so talking about the average increase in Earth temperature is easy. It's just one number, but it's almost criminally misleading. Europe is already seeing 4 degrees C increases in their average temperature above a pre-industrial comparison. That's 4. That's not 3, and that's not 2. That's 4. Now, somewhere else, it may not be going up that much, so that on the average, the increase is 2. But do people in Southern Europe care that it's on average 2? No, because that's not their experience. We have to stop talking about the global average because people don't experience the global average. They experience the conditions where they are. And if you happen to be in a place that's not heating as much as the rest of the world, well, that's great. You may want to stay there if you can. But some other places are going to be heating in an extreme fashion. And those are maybe places you don't want to be. What is this? People are yelling now. I have no idea. So even this discussion of an average is meaningless. But we hear this all the time in articles like this. Oh, I see. This is a protest. We're here on my street. What are we protesting? They've got picket signs. They're honking their horns. What is wrong with today? Everything is messed up. They're right here on my sidewalk. What are they protesting? I can't tell. Oh, this is ICE. ICE. Yeah. This is the students from the college prep academy down the street that we're fortunate to have. These are good kids. They're all males. It's a male college prep academy. And so they're protesting, and they're going down my sidewalk with big signs. Protect immigrants. Now, interesting. Good for them. They're getting politically engaged. It's messing up my live stream, but whatever. It's still kind of funny. It's cute. And now we got horns honking, and this hasn't been a big deal in San Jose, but I guess it's going to be. I might even want to end this stream right now. Oh my goodness. So anyway, we'll continue just in case it's not too obvious what's going on. Now, I think the reason why MEER, this transcript was lifted from the MEER podcast. I think the reason why MEER is wanting this physicist on, and they needed this discussion, is because of what they are doing. MEER is a nonprofit, and I've seen their podcast before, and I understand what they're doing, and there's going to be so much more of this in the future. So much more of this in the future that I'm going to have to talk about it regularly. What MEER is doing, and let me bring up I actually brought up their website, just trying to be fair here. Can I actually put this? Can I put this? Is it worth putting this up? Yeah, let's do this. MEER, Project for Climate Change. MEER, which is an acronym, stands for Mirrors for Earth's Energy Rebalancing. And MEER kind of sounds like mirror, right? So this is a wordplay. I like it. Nonprofit initiative focused on mitigating climate change by deploying low-cost surface-based reflective and passive solar mirrors to reflect sunlight back into space. I did a video, I think of my last one, talking about Rupert Reed, and I said that he's correct. Rupert Reed is beyond mitigation. Let me focus on a word here, okay? Let's do this. Focused on mitigating climate change. Did that show up? Not really. I need a different color. Let's pick a proper Sharpie color. Okay. Mitigating climate change. So this is mitigation. Mitigation means you can't stop it, so you're going to try and redirect it. We can't stop global heating at this point because at this point we're heating up, so it's too late. The heat is already here, and now that's what we're doing. We're doing that now, and there's no way around it. you mitigate by trying to compensate somehow. So if the incoming sunlight is causing the Earth to heat, not because it's any different with the sun, incoming sunlight has always been the source of the Earth's seasons, summers and winters, for example, and just our general habitable climate. We're not frozen, is the point. We could be frozen like Mars, but we're not, because we have a thick atmosphere with heat-retaining gases like CO2 and nitrous oxides, and moisture. And when the sunlight comes in and heats the Earth, then those gases trap the heat, so it can't escape. So with that's physics. We can't change any of that. But you could change the one part where the sunlight comes in and causes heat, because you could put up huge mirrors, like all over the place, like all over the surface of the Earth, basically, and reflect that sunlight back into space before it can heat the Earth. So that's what they're doing here. Now they're calling their thing a low-cost, surface-based, reflective, and passive solar mirrors to reflect sunlight back into space. Low-cost, whatever. The number of mirrors you're going to have will number in the trillions. So even if the mirrors are $1 a piece, and they won't be, they'll be hundreds of dollars a piece. But if they're $1 a piece, then you're talking about trillions of dollars to do this project. Could you maybe do a smaller project, like mirrors on individual houses, mirrors in individual cities? Yes, you could. And maybe you could cool your house by reflecting the sunlight off your house. But you could also cool your house by just adding insulation to the ceiling. If you don't have enough, or you don't have any, then that's one thing you could do. So there's lots of ways we can mitigate for the fact that things are going to get hot. But somewhere, the sun is hitting the Earth. 3/4 of the Earth is water. So somewhere the sun is hitting water every day, all day. And you can't put mirrors out on the water, can you? Maybe. But that's not $1 a mirror now. If you have floating mirrors, then you're talking thousands of dollars for the same mirror, because now it's floating. And there's going to be replacement costs, because now you're going to have hurricanes sinking all your mirrors. So now maybe it's $10,000 a mirror. And so now we're into quadrillions, not trillions, but quadrillions worth of expense to do this. So you can call them low cost, but that doesn't mean this isn't going to cost you anything. It's going to be so expensive you can't manage it. But that's what they're selling. And they're literally selling this. And the reason why they're selling this is because governments and scientists and researchers are now ringing the alarm bell. And the alarm bell is, we fucked up. Oh my God. We figured out in 2023 that we fucked up. Ring the bell, ring the bell, ring the bell. And so now that they're ringing the bell, that, we're in trouble. And that's because we are. And you can think it's a hoax, and you can think it's a conspiracy, and you can think it's whatever else, but we're in trouble, and they're ringing the bell now. And so organizations like this, like MEER, are going to be propped up real quick. And they're all going to have a proposed solution, and they're all going to get grant money to study the solution and make pilot projects and see if they can deploy them. And, they'll have a 5-year career, pretending to mitigate. And then someone like Rupert Reed or myself, I'll come along and I'll say, that's not going to work. They're never going to deploy that. And they'll play around with it. It'll be like a game that they're playing around with, but they're never going to deploy that. They don't have the tens or hundreds of trillions of dollars to cover the Earth with mirrors. What are we even talking about? And does China want your mirrors? How about Saudi Arabia? Do they want your mirrors? Does everybody on Earth want your mirrors? Or do they think your mirrors are stupid? And they don't want mirrors on their farmland, and they don't want mirrors over their forests, and they don't want mirrors over their waterways. They don't want mirrors on their rooftops. Take your stupid mirrors and leave us alone. And so even if you could come up with a pilot project, and you could even say, look, it actually works. We can reflect sunlight into space. Is the whole planet going to be on board with this? No, of course not. No, simply no. No, they're not. Well, they could be. Yeah, and monkeys could fly out of my butt. They're not going to be. We can't agree to anything. We agreed to, atomic weapon controls, voluntary atomic weapon controls, only because there were so few of us that had atomic weapons, we could actually get around the table in one room and talk about it. Well, there were 7 nations that had atomic weapons, and so 7 nations could all agree to rein in their atomic weapon programs. Except now, of course, everybody wants atomic weapons because of Russia and China. So now everybody's going to have them. So even that was temporary. And what about this thing that we're going to cover the earth with mirrors? Who's going to spend money on that? Who's going to want that? No one's going to want that. This is never going to happen. But because researchers are ringing the alarm bells, oh no, oh no, oh no, it's happening, it's here, it's coming, it's here, then these people, MEER, can say, oh, well, just give us money and we'll study the problem. And in 5 years, they'll go through their grant, their $10 million or whatever they get, and they'll have a pilot project, and the politicians get something out of it. They can say, look, we are funding these mitigation programs, mirrors on the ground and mirrors in space, and sulfur dioxide emissions in the upper atmosphere, and marine cloud brightening, and ice brightening, and a bunch of other things that I've heard about, and there'll be more besides. There'll be all kinds of crackpot bullshit that shows up. Well, it's because we're really in trouble. That part is real. We're really in trouble. And so they're going to roll out all these mitigation strategies. Well, the point of mitigation is you don't have to change. We'll put mirrors. And nowhere in the statement, we will put mirrors on the earth, is there any mention that people will change. They'll stop driving. They'll stop flying. They'll stop moving goods. Nowhere in there is there any statement that people will stop burning fossil fuels. There's nothing. We'll just put mirrors. And so provided that your pitch to the government doesn't contain anything like we have to change human behaviors on Earth so the Earth does not become uninhabitable. So long as you don't pitch that, then you can pitch whatever you want. Because the politicians know if they ever fund a project that is meant to get people off of fossil fuels or leave fossil fuels in the ground, then they're going to lose their office. They just won't get reelected. Because they destroyed people's lives. Because people need fossil fuels every day, all the time, for everything. But if you're going to talk about space mirrors or surface-based mirrors, and you're going to call them cheap, woohoo, there's the magic word right there. Low-cost surface-based missiles, and you're going to mitigate the problem, and no one has to change, and everyone can just do what they're doing, and don't you have to even think about what they're doing, and the governments never have to think about what people are doing that's causing this problem, like burning fossil fuels, driving and flying, and moving food all over the planet and everything else. Then we'll just do the mirrors. We'll promise a solution. And if in 5 years we don't have a solution, well, we tried. And I, as a politician, I voted to spend the taxpayer money on this project to see if it would work. And it didn't work. Or it did work, but no one else was interested in it. Or it did work, but then things got really bad and we couldn't really deploy the solution anymore. But you bought yourself time. And the people at MEER were willing to come up with a narrative story, a fairy tale, that the politicians could fund and just wipe their hand of the problem. They're done. That's what this is about. And you're going to hear in the future, because now the alarm bells are ringing. I'm not making that up. You think I'm making that up? I'm not. The alarm bells are ringing, and that's why we're going to see more and more of this. And some of the projects will be absolutely outrageous, but they'll still get funding. They'll still get funding because we don't care if the project works. It just has to tell a good story. That's it. That's all the project has to do is tell a good story. And provided that, it lets some of the people get away in a lifeboat, well, then that's a good story for some of those people. And if those people are wealthy donors and wealthy politicians and wealthy capitalists and media owners, and they're the ones that get on a lifeboat because that's something that they can afford, that they can buy for themselves. That's all they care about. And the rest of us are going to be hearing about mirrors. Not lifeboats. Mirrors. So while I appreciate the fact that this podcast was talking about the real risks of crossing 3 degrees C by 2050, this is a kind of denial that sometime between now and 2050, someone, whether it's MEER or someone else, it doesn't matter, there's going to be thousands of these startups, okay? That by 2050, which is a good 25 years from now, so kind of not really in anyone's window of concern, right? 25 years is a long time. Well, I won't even be alive in all likelihood. And, people who are middle-aged now, 50, 25 years from now, they'll be at the end of life. So what do they care? They're going to leave it for their children or their grandchildren. And they'll have this story that they will figure it out. Somehow the next generation will figure it out. And that's the story. That's the adult fairy tale that we're all living by now. And we've already run out of time. And the fact that we've run out of time means that mitigation isn't going to work. So what's the harm in MEER saying they're going to put mirrors everywhere and it's going to be low cost and it's going to be egalitarian and everyone's going to benefit? And so that's what they're saying. That's what they're saying. They're not really saying they're going to fix the problem. They're just saying, we're going to work on it and fund us and give us funding. And in 25 years, when things get really bad, we'll have a solution. And if it's not us, it'll be someone else. And we're going to throw money at this and everyone's going to study this. We're all going to mitigate this. And eventually, nobody will have to change anything they're doing. They'll still drive and they'll fly and they'll have their second home in the Hamptons and everything else. And they'll vacation, and they'll go to Europe, and it won't be hot, and it won't be raining, and it won't be a storm, and it won't be a hurricane. It'll all be fine. Don't worry about it. There'll be plenty of food. Don't worry about it. Mirrors. Or something else. That's the stage we're at now. This type of article trying to convince you that there's a mitigation prevents you from thinking about adaptation. And that was what I was saying about Rupert Reed's transition in my last video. He has given up on mitigation. He knows it's not going to happen. He's a smart guy. And like me, he's trying to be grounded in reality. And the reality is a combination of what's really happening in the world with global heating. That's real. We got data now. We know what's happening. And also human behavior, which is another type of reality. We all know how people are. You're a certain way, I'm a certain way, we're all a certain way. And we don't want interruptions, and we don't want changes, and we don't want to be told we're doing anything wrong, right? Maybe someone else is doing something wrong, but we're not. And we don't want any static, and it's certainly no fear. I don't want to be afraid. Nobody wants to be afraid. Don't tell me I have something to be afraid of. And here in America, it's becoming increasingly likely that current and future authoritarian regimes will make it illegal to fearmonger. It will become domestic terrorism. The Trump administration just recently defunded, what was the name of it? NRCC or something, National Climate Research Center or something like that. Defunded them, not because they were fraudulent or because they were doing bad work or they were doing work that no one cared about, because they were scaring people. That's it. They were scaring people. Wow. So that's the threshold now? We're going to defund your entire organization, fire all your scientists, shut down your supercomputers used for modeling because you scare people? Okay, fine. That's what we're doing now. That's what we're doing. I'm writing my second novel, Ariadne. One of the key plot elements is that it becomes a crime. So there's a little bit of overlap with the novel 1984 here. It becomes a crime to scare people. However you do it. You can't talk about the rise of authoritarianism because that's scary. You can't talk about bad weather. Like we just had a tornado outbreak in the southeast, if that happened, right? You couldn't have news on tornado outbreaks in the U.S. southeast, which happen all the time, by the way. Oh, and they're getting worse. You couldn't report on that because that would make people scared. That would be, it's not that you're fear-mongering. It's just the truth. But if it makes people afraid, then you can go to prison. So in my novel, which is speculative fiction, but it's just taking current events and just rolling them into a fictional account of the world. It's not fantasy that we are going to make it difficult to impossible to talk about scary things. Now, MEER can talk about how mirrors are going to save us from global heating, because that's not scary. You see, they can get grants for that. They can get tax dollars to study the problem and come up with solutions and manufacture some mirrors and put them in place and see what they do. Because it's not scary. You can do that, but you can't do climate science in the future. Or almost currently. You can't really currently, here in the U.S. anyway. And I'm sure once it happens in the U.S., it'll happen in Europe and the U.K. and India and China and everywhere else. Okay, once the ball gets rolling, they're all going to jump on this because this is what they want. They don't want any talk about this. You can talk about mitigating. You can talk about saving the world, but you can't talk about why you're saving the world. And we won't be able to talk about global heating or climate change because even currently, it's considered too scary. Not wrong. Not fraudulent, just frightening. So stop doing it. Now, of course, physics doesn't care if you talk about physics or not. Physics doesn't care. Gravity didn't go away just because we didn't have Newton's equations for describing gravity and motion under gravity. Gravity existed the entire time. And then we discovered equations to describe gravity and orbital mechanics, and then we knew something about gravity. But if we were to repudiate Newton and say that, well, Newton's wrong, and Newton was a crank, and Newton was a communist, so we can't have any of his writings taught in schools, gravity doesn't go away, because gravity is real. If you don't want to talk about it, you don't want to understand it, that's fine. But gravity never goes away. The same thing with global heating. You don't want to talk about it? It's scary. You're going to criminalize people who do research and talk about their research. You're going to criminalize journalists who talk about this in public, in their editorials and in their online magazines and in their Substack and wherever else they do. You're going to criminalize those people and call them domestic terrorists because they're talking about something scary? Go ahead. Go right ahead. You do that. Physics doesn't care. Now, MEER is going to put mirrors all over the place, and they're going to get funding to do that. And they're making a job for themselves. And once it's obvious that governments are willing to throw money at a fairy tale, then everyone is going to want to get on board. Everyone's going to have a fairy tale. Everyone is going to want to get funding. And the governments will fund them. It will work. It'll work because the governments want a fairy tale. They don't want scary climate science. They want fairy tales about how wonderful things are going to be. And that's why I'm writing my novel, Ariadne, because it's fucking scary, folks. Sorry. It's bad. It's getting worse. It's going to get horrific. And my novel takes place over 5 years, not by the year 2050. My novel starts in 2027, and by 2031 or 33 or so, it's completely wrapped up. Done and dusted. 5 years. Because that's our reality. I mean, it's not our reality until it happens. But based on observations and physics and an understanding of the situation, an understanding of human behavior, and an understanding of what governments are doing right now, including making it more and more difficult to talk about this, then that's what's going to happen. That's what's going to happen. As simple as that. It's speculative fiction. Ariadne is a work of speculative fiction, but the speculation is pretty shallow, folks. It's almost like a documentary. It's just set in the future, but the future is coming, and we're headed into a polycrisis. That's it. We're all going to be there. We're all going to be on the Titanic. And it's going to look like this. Just one thing after another. So, thanks for watching to the end. Thanks for being here. It encourages me to do these things. If you like these kind of videos, or at least you're interested in the topics, then do subscribe to the channel. And leave a like, because, of course, it helps the algorithm understand that people care about this kind of stuff. And my recommendation to everybody who finds himself in the polycrisis, pay attention. Don't let them tell you a story. Pay attention. And if you're able to, don't die.